Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the last SILA Foundation webinar of 2024, The Impact of Technology on the Insurance Industry. Before introducing today's speaker, I have a few housekeeping items. This webinar is 1 hour in length and is being recorded. We will provide you with a link to the recording in the post-webinar survey email you will be receiving. We encourage you to complete the survey as we appreciate hearing your feedback. Please mute your mics and turn off those videos if you have permissions so that our focus stays on our speaker. We ask that you please put your questions in the chat box, and we will be monitoring those and posing the questions to the speaker on your behalf. We will answer as many of the questions as time allows, but I'll have a link in there in case you have any missed that you can send them to us. It'll be in the chat in a few minutes. Now I'd like to introduce today's speaker. Although Fred Karlinski is a popular SILA presenter who needs little introduction, Fred's expertise has been cultivated for over 30 years of experience representing the interests of the insurers, the reinsurers, and a wide variety of other insurance-related entities. He is a recognized authority on national insurance regulatory and compliance issues, and he has taken leadership positions in many insurance trade organizations. Fred also serves as a legal advisor for both the SILA and SILA Foundation boards. Today, Fred is going to discuss how technological advances have changed how insurance companies operate and interact with consumers, how these advances are impacting the insurance industry, and how those advances are viewed by regulators. Please join me in welcoming Fred Karlinski to our virtual webinar stage.
Thank you very much, Mary Ellen. Look at that ugly mug there. That's scary, seeing that large. So anyway, thanks for having me, and thanks for all that you do for SILA. Before I get started, I would be remiss. This is the last webinar of the year, I guess you said, and I would be remiss if I did not recognize two good friends, Diana Capes, who retired, and Sherry Coleman, who's taken over as executive director. You guys are both great. Diana, you did a lot for SILA. You did a lot for me as a friend, and appreciate everything. And Sherry, we same with you, and look forward to the work that you're going to do moving forward. So if we could go to the next slide, it's just a quick bio of me. Talks about a little bit about what I am, who I am, and what I've done over the course of time. On the next slide, if we could there's a quick disclaimer here. Any good lawyer is going to give you a disclaimer whenever they're doing a presentation, but the materials provided are intended to be general. They're not specific legal advice, and we're not giving legal advice. Last but not least, from a preparatory standpoint, let me just read this antitrust statement. We'll not read it, but put it on the screen. It's the next slide, and it just makes sure that everyone understands that there are competitors on this Zoom, and please don't talk about any specific company type of information. So with that, let me move on to the next slide, which is the agenda. In order to talk about AI, you really have to talk a little bit about data privacy, cybersecurity, and then we'll talk about AI in the insurance industry, talk about international regulation of AI. That's different than federal regulation, and it's different than state regulation. If we have time before 5 Eastern, we'll open it up for questions. If not, we'll flash my email address and my phone number on the screen. I know a lot of you are clients already and are consulting with us on these issues, but happy to talk to anyone and try to be helpful to the extent we can. There's a lot going on in the space. It's way more information than we can cover in an hour. We'll cover as much as we can and then go from there. And by the way, I'm sitting in my office in New York City. I'm usually in Florida, but I had meetings up here in New York, so you see some pretty cool views behind me. So if we go to the next slide, Mary Ellen, and after that, the next slide. So the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, is regarded by many to be the toughest data privacy laws in the world. As the name suggests, the GDPR also has elements of data security that's baked into its core. The regulation became effective in May of 2018. It's applicable to all entities that use, store, share, process personal data of individuals in the EU or EU economic area. A significant percentage of U.S. businesses are also subject to this because they collect or process personal data from individuals that are located in the EU, or because they monitor their activity on a website. The GDPR imposes obligations onto organizations anywhere in the world, so long as they target or collect data related to people in the EU. So it's a highly expansive regulation. If we go on to the next slide, some of the key requirements for the US data privacy framework, because there is a framework, really were developed to establish and facilitate transatlantic commerce by providing US organizations with reliable mechanisms for personal data transfers to the US from the European Union, European Economic Area, the UK, and Switzerland that are consistent with EU and UK and Swiss laws. So what you see there is the elements and the requirements for participating in the EU-US data privacy framework. And so that's an important framework for companies to be aware of as it relates to data privacy. On the next slide, there is a new law in China dealing with personal information and personal information protection. That law imposes heightened safeguards for the protection of personal information of its residents, and it also has extraterritorial application to organizations not only in China, but outside the country as well. The law went into effect in November of 2021, and it works together with China's existing cybersecurity laws as well as its data security laws as well. The PIPL specifies the scope of personal information, clarifies the legal basis for processing that information, lays down the obligations and responsibilities imposed on processors, and imposes stringent requirements on data location, safeguarding China's interests in the case of any type of cross-border transfer of information. The PIPL is similar to the GDPR in that it extends its territorial scope to encompass personal information processing entities that are outside of China as well. And so that China PIPL is very extensive. I won't go into it, but needless to say, like I said, both GDPR and China personal injury protection, personal information protection law, both cover extraterritorial type of situations. And so US companies that are doing business in those countries, that are doing business with those individuals in those countries, or whose data is possibly collected from individuals in those countries are all subject to both the GDPR and the China Personal Information Protection Law. Moving on now really to, on the next slide, what's going on federally. So different than the European Union and GDPR and different than China, if you will, the US lacks a comprehensive federal consumer privacy law. That is, there's no comprehensive one-size-fits-all approach to privacy and cyber in the United States. Some federal laws will apply to certain sectors. For example, everyone's familiar with HIPAA and Gramm-Leach-Bliley, so health and financial information, certain information relating to children under 13, FERPA, the Federal Education Protection Act, and things like that, all apply in different formats to data that's collected in the United States. On the next slide, I would tell you that the rules that govern the use and management of personal health information are a great example of what the federal government does on an industry-specific basis in terms of data privacy regulation. HIPAA, as I think most of the practitioners on the Zoom know, is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. That's the US's primary privacy and security law for health information. The Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, which I mentioned earlier, FERPA, protects students' immunization information and other school health records. Again, very specific to those issues. Children's Online Privacy Protection Act protects personal information of children under 13. Again, very specific. Fair Credit Reporting Act protects collection, use, and reporting of consumer credit data. And then the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act protects privacy of consumer data collected by financial institutions. All of this is important because AI is impacting every single one of the aspects of these federal privacy laws, and we'll get into that a little bit more when we talk about some of the broad regulatory things that are going on today as it relates to AI. So the American Privacy Rights Act was introduced during this Congress. As everyone knows, there was an election recently, and so this did not pass during this Congress. Unless otherwise refiled, it will not continue on into the next conference, meaning someone has to file this legislation. It was filed by Senator Cantwell from Washington and Kathy McMorris-Rogers from Washington as well. Bipartisan. McMorris-Rogers is a Republican. Cantwell is a Democrat, both out of Washington. But it really just goes to show you the bipartisan nature of this discussion. And the attempt of the American Privacy Rights Act was to create some type of a uniform approach to privacy in the US, i.e., do what we had not done before, which was create one uniform standard in the United States. As I mentioned, that legislation has not passed. It will not pass because Congress is effectively done. This Congress is. And so if it's going to go forward, it's going to have to go forward with a different sponsor in the House as well as in the next Congress. So what has the NAIC done as it relates to data privacy? As you may know, and on the next slide, the NAIC's main purpose, or one of the main purposes of the NAIC, is to promote some type of uniformity when uniformity is appropriate for U.S. insurance regulators. It should come as no surprise that given the flurry of data privacy activity at the state level, that the NAIC has been busy working on a data privacy model law. The first draft of Model 670 was introduced, was released, if you will, in February of last year by the Consumer Privacy Protection, and then the Insurance Consumer Privacy Protection Model Law was introduced 674 during the 2023 spring national meeting. It was drafted with the objective really to supersede the NAIC Insurance Information and Privacy Protection Model 670 and the Privacy of Consumer Financial and Health Information Regulation 672, which have been in place for decades and have been widely adopted by member states. In drafting 674, there were a number of things that the drafters intended. The model is extraordinarily broad in scope, and if it's ultimately put in place, could fundamentally change the manner in which insurance regulated entities conduct their business. Notably, there's a safe harbor provision for entities that comply with HIPAA and also a potential private right of action. Many of the concepts in 674 derive from some of the state privacy laws, which we'll talk through in just a few minutes. At the NAIC summer meeting, the Privacy Protections Working Group, on the next slide, received oral comments for the new privacy model law, and they revised the draft, which was exposed in July of 2023. The revised draft addressed comments that were received by trade associations and other interested parties. The trade associations and others that commented during the summer 2023 meeting raised concerns with several provisions of the model. The privacy group is still working on these types of things and look to see this be a continuing discussion at the NAIC level and at the state level as well. Currently, there are 15 states, California, Virginia, Connecticut, Colorado, Utah, Iowa, Indiana, Tennessee, Oregon, Montana, Texas, Delaware, Florida, New Jersey, and New Hampshire that have comprehensive data privacy laws in place. These are comprehensive. They are more expansive than just insurance. It doesn't make sense to go through each of these. If anyone has a specific question on any of them, I can try to answer it at the end or later. But the bottom line is you see that there are a fair number, and every year we're seeing more and more states get in place these comprehensive type of data privacy laws. States that have not yet enacted data privacy laws but have narrower consumer privacy laws in place include Maine, Michigan, Minnesota, Nevada, New York, Vermont, and Washington. In 2025, three more states already have comprehensive data privacy legislation ready to come into play. That's Nebraska, Minnesota, and Maryland. So you see a number of states either currently or in the near future have data privacy, broad or at least narrow legislation in place within their states. As I mentioned earlier, look to see that expand over the course of time, and look to see legislatures deal with this issue, because this is an issue that not only impacts AI, but impacts the broader consumer issues that states face with data privacy. So moving on, you really can't have a discussion about data privacy without cybersecurity and cybersecurity concerns. So similar to the way we started earlier with data privacy, let me start and talk a little bit about what's going on with the European Union. So the European Cyber Resilience Act is a legal framework that is intended to describe the cybersecurity requirements for hardware and software products with digital elements placed on the market of the European Union. Manufacturers are now obliged to take security seriously through a product's life cycle. Two major problems are addressed by this. The low levels of cybersecurity products with digital elements is really very widespread. Vulnerabilities exist, and the insufficient and inconsistent security updates to address them. In addition, there's an insufficient understanding and access to information. And so when users are choosing products, the question is whether they have adequate cybersecurity protections in any type of secure manner. And so that's what the European Cyber Resilience Act tries to deal with. The US similarly has tried to put something in place as it relates to a national cybersecurity strategy. With respect to that, last year, in March of last year, 2023, President Biden released the National Cybersecurity Strategy, which is a guiding document that has now set the course for how the Biden administration, which is obviously coming to an end, but how the Biden administration drives policy and action to defend our increasing digital world. There are 5 pillars of initiatives within this cybersecurity strategy. The first is defending critical infrastructure. For those that follow this, you know that a lot of what we see here is outdated infrastructure and things that really need to be, in some cases, more than just patched. I know patches are a discussion that we've had for quite some time on cyber, but really it's more just the infrastructure and making sure that there are the right safeguards in place for that. Secondly, one of the initiatives is disrupting and dismantling threat actors. As many of you know from hearing me speak on this or others, the threat actors are often other nation states, specifically a lot coming out of China and Russia. We see that every day with some of the attempts to break into our systems, both governmental and non-governmental. And so dismantling and disrupting those threat actors is a key pillar of the national cyber security policy. Similarly, shaping market forces, driving security and resilience, investing in a resilient future, and forging international partnerships to pursue shared goals are all some of the pillars of the initiatives of the cybersecurity strategy. I would just mention that on the forging international partnership level, clearly, as I mentioned earlier, the other nation states that are doing this, we're best served by having those relationships to try and stop these types of things. I think at the end of the day, the other states and nations, or nation states, if you will, that are doing this to us, we're doing it to them. So trying to figure out a way to come up with shared international goals is really an important factor out there in terms of moving forward. Let's talk a little bit about the NAIC and what they're doing, similar to the last discussion. The NAIC Insurance Data Security Model Law was adopted, seems like yesterday, but in 2017 at the fall national meeting. The goal of that is to mitigate potential damage of data breaches. That applies to insurers, insurance agents, and other entities licensed by insurance departments. It does establish standards for data security and standards for the investigation notification to insurance commissioners of a cybersecurity event applicable to licensees. It doesn't create or imply a private cause of action for a violation of its provisions, and that's critical. And you're going to hear a lot of discussion about private causes of action as these as cyber issues, as privacy issues, as AI issues come to the forefront, and know that that's a big issue for insurers. A private cause of action makes it very difficult to move forward in a productive way because the unknown and the uncertainties of those private causes of action. So on the next slide, we have a listing of the states and pending state action as current as of September or the summer of this year, of states that have addressed the topic of the NAIC model. The map that you see on the screen does not reflect a determination as to whether the pending or enacted legislation contains all elements of the model, but just that they've basically gone down that path. 24 jurisdictions have adopted the model law. 2 jurisdictions have related laws, but have not adopted similar statutes compared to the model law, and that's New York and Puerto Rico. So that's sort of an overview of where we are as it relates to cybersecurity and data privacy, which, as I mentioned, in my opinion, are tied into the issue of AI. So let's talk a little bit about now about AI and the insurance industry. So years ago, when we were talking about big data, that was all the rage, and it wasn't really AI at that time. So as insurers collect more information, more granular data, they're collecting something that has been dubbed big data, which is defined sort of as a complex volume of data and the set of technologies that analyze and manage that. So really, in a lot of ways, the precursor to what we now call AI. The goal of big data is to assist insurers in underwriting, in the rating of policies, in the marketing of policies, as well as the claim settlement process. But when you deal with big data and you deal with data and you deal with AI, some of the concerns consistent with the data privacy discussion and the cybersecurity discussion we just had are how information is collected, how it's safeguarded, and how it's maintained. So those are the main concerns out there. From a use case perspective, big data is really, and this is on the next slide, unstructured and or structured data that's being used to influence underwriting, rating, pricing, forms, marketing, and claims handling. Structured data refers to data in tables and defined fields. Unstructured may be things such as social media postings, reports, and the like. The process of using big data uses several techniques, including data mining, statistical modeling, machine learning, and in some cases, narrow artificial intelligence in the forecasts. And obviously, that artificial intelligence is only getting greater as we move on. Insurers use big data in a host of ways. I'm not going to walk through all of them, but you see on the screen a number of ways, whether it's in the marketing, the claims processing, the pricing, or other mechanisms that there's a use for big data and AI. So let's now that we've talked a little bit about big data, talk about artificial intelligence. And that really, for purposes of this discussion, is the ability of machines to conduct tasks that require human intelligence. And if that sounds 1984ish, if that sounds robotish, if that sounds futuristic, we're there. The computers and the processors can learn things, they can reason, they can solve problems, and they can use natural language processing to basically get to a certain place. We see it on our computers. We see it when we dial into a virtual assistant. We see it all the time now. And these are really sort of computer systems, if you will, that can perform tasks that require human intelligence. So they've got the ability, without calling in sick, by the way, although I guess you could have a computer problem, right? But they have the ability to basically do what humans do. So let's talk a little bit about machine learning, because oftentimes machine learning and AI are used interchangeably, but they're really not synonymous concepts. Machine learning is, in a lot of ways, a subset of AI. It involves the use of algorithms that enable machines to learn from data and iteratively improve their performance on a task without being explicitly programmed. And so you have a lot of machine learning that is being used out there, and all the time it continues to evolve and hopefully continues to start to be better. So we're going to see a fair amount over the course of time of machine learning becoming, in addition to AI, the broader picture becoming more important of our lives. So let's talk a little bit about AI and what is commonly known as the Internet of Things. So the Internet of Things is interconnected devices that are embedded with sensors, software, or other related technologies. We are a completely connected society, whether it's mobility or the connected car, whether it's smart housing, smart health, such as what you might have on your wrist, or commercial lines. The bottom line is our digital ecosystems are becoming more expansive, greater every day, and frankly, we're more reliant on them all the time. We've talked about in the past in the public domain some of the concerns people have with how connected we are in terms of being able to hack into cars, hack into people's security systems or their homes. And so those are real concerns and real things that are going on in the Internet of Things and the connectivity that we see that is only fostered and advanced by AI. In addition, there's another concept called NLP, or natural language processing, which is an AI technology that enables machines to understand human speech in text or form to communicate with humans in our own natural language. And so what you see there is some of these, again, virtual assistants, the first line of defense, where they're trying to figure out if they can deal with something without a human, if they can figure out, if they can't, the best way to route this. That's what natural language processing is. It's far from perfect now. It's getting better. On the screen, you see the elements of that moving forward. But needless to say, there are increased operational efficiencies, reductions in premium prices, and increased profit margins based on the use of NLP. One of the things I would also say, though, is, and I know I get annoyed at this, I think it's getting better, and ultimately will get much better as well. So as we continue on in 2024 and move into 2025, the role of AI is really going to reshape the insurance industry, and it will continue to expand. It will offer unprecedented opportunities for innovation, unprecedented opportunities for efficiency, and personalized service as well. So, some of the pros of AI in the insurance industry is that it will enhance efficiency and productivity. The automation not only boasts productivity, but also allows insurers to allocate human resources to more complex areas, leading to better customer service. In the analytics and risk assessment area, the view is that the AI analytics and machine learning models offer a nuanced approach and a nuanced understanding of risk, and therefore they're able to help insurers tailor policies to individual insureds' needs. So look to see continued development happen in the area of risk assessment and pricing. Similarly, there's the ability through the use of AI to have personalized customer experience, maybe more so than we see from before. You have a 24/7 customer service ability to use these algorithms to get you to that place. And you really can put yourself in a position where, through the use of AI, you're tailoring products and offerings to certain consumers. AI's ability to analyze vast amounts of data is going to be significant in the fraud detection and protection area. We're going to see more use of AI in that area. You know, one of the concerns people always have with fraud is if you get it wrong, right? You don't want to say someone's done something wrong and not be right about that. But this should help companies ferret out, what's right and what's wrong, and should put them in a better situation to deal with that on the front end as quickly as possible. Last but not least, AI allows for the innovation of new product offerings a lot quicker because there's the ability to pressure test and check things quicker using AI versus other potential tools. So the table on this slide highlights the wide variety of AI applications and the cases for the use of AI in insurance. You have marketing, you have product development. Here we have use cases and benefits on the screen, sales and distribution, underwriting, customer service and policy administration. My favorite, really, claims management. I think there's going to be so much that can be done on the AI side on claims management. And think about this, that's where you really get hurt. As I start my law school class every day, I say that insurance is the only product that you don't know the cost of goods sold when you price it. And it's really more the back end amounts that hurt you than the front end. I mean, the front end in a lot of ways is market driven. It should be actuarial. Sometimes it's more actuarial than others, but really where you can make a difference is claims management. And so I think all these areas, marketing, product development, sales and distribution, underwriting, customer service, are all important, but I think I would keep a close eye on claims management because I think that's uber critical in making AI more beneficial for the industry. Figure 1 on this slide from PwC illustrates the areas in which insurers are benefiting from investments in AI based on a 2002 survey of 1,000 participants by PwC. Again, you see the areas that they're seeing benefits. Growing revenue is the lowest percentage there. But at the end of the day, I think you're going to see huge potential to do that moving forward. There are some risks and ethical considerations whenever you use something like AI. The risks and concerns related to the use of AI include transparency and explainability. Those are pretty, self-evident, but just making sure that people understand how something is happening, why it's happening. And in that regard, bias, unintended bias, even worse, really are things that the insurance regulator, both bias and unintended bias, are things that the insurance regulator is going to look at, among others, when they're trying to figure out whether AI is appropriate to use in any particular instance. Data is the fuel of both traditional underwriting and AI. Different types of data perform different functions. And so you've got to make sure that those functions are being used and being put forth the right way in order to make them worthwhile in the use of AI and in thinking through the ethical considerations of the use of AI. So some of the key elements for the responsible use of data include making sure that data is secure. I mean, we talked a lot about privacy. We talked a lot about cyber. Those are all, part and parcel of this issue of making sure data is secure. The issue of errors, outliers, and variability in data and data quality is real. That's a concern when you're dealing with the ethics of data. Concern. I mean, it's a concern generally speaking, but it's a heightened concern with AI. Similarly, consent of the subject to the collection and use of their personal data. That's been a big issue on the privacy side for a while. It's becoming a bigger issue. Who knows in the next iteration of the world if it's going to be as big, but certainly it's a situation now that we've got to be mindful of. Adherence of model outcomes used for risk assessments, predictions, and decision making to cultural and socially accepted norms is another ethical consideration that you need to think through when you're dealing with AI. Last but not least, communicating risk drivers and decisions and outcomes is something that we've talked about. And for example, the credit scoring space, making sure people understand why something's happening. In this particular case, there's going to be have to check off. Maybe that's more AI, or maybe it's a person doing that. But that communication and those risk drivers and those decisions is going to be important for people to understand moving forward. So let's talk a little bit about the regulation of AI and where we find ourselves today. So a little bit over a year ago, in October of 2023, the G7, the group of 7 industrial countries, agreed to a code of conduct for companies developing advanced artificial intelligence systems. Governments are really seeking to mitigate the risks of potential misuse of technology. And so that was one of the reasons why that group got together. It's a voluntary code of conduct, but it is a good first start. The OECD adopted the recommendations in artificial intelligence all the way back 5 years ago in 2019. The G20 also has gotten into the picture through its AI principles. Again, similar to what we've talked about in the US and generally, transparency, accountability, rights of individuals, democracy and diversity are critical. Last but not least, there is an international initiative called the Global Partnership on AI. It's established to develop responsible AI and to use artificial intelligence in a manner that respects human rights and the shared democratic values of its members. This was announced by Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau, and it's comprised of 25 member countries in this partnership. Look to see there be continuing discussion about the use of AI and about these types of consortiums and other types of partnerships, if you will, nationally and internationally to move those forward. The United States has also gotten the United Nations has also gotten into the picture through its global resolution on artificial intelligence. The resolution aims to foster the protection of personal data, enhance privacy policies that are out there already, ensure close monitoring of AI for potential risks, and upholding human rights. I guess that in part is unintended bias or something like that. But needless to say, there's a lot of activity in this space, and it looks to continue on into the near term, at the very least, while people try to figure out the best way to use AI. Earlier this year, in March of this year, the members of the European Parliament endorsed the Artificial Intelligence Act with 523 votes for, 46 against, 49 abstentions. This is the world's first comprehensive AI law, and it's likely to have significant influence on the rapid developments of AI regulation in other jurisdictions, including the United States. Article 1 of the Act explains its purpose. There are other portions you see on the screen. The notion that this is a risk-based approach to the use of AI, and there are a number of provisions that exist in the EU AI Act. For example, and these are in a lot of ways fairly similar to what we've seen out of the EU before with GDPR and other aspects of regulation dealing with privacy or cybersecurity, or in this case, AI, but a protection of fundamental rights, a ban on certain AI applications, exemptions for law enforcement, obligations for high-risk systems, transparency in the structuring of these programs, and a support for innovation at the SME level. So the notion that this is something that's just left for Fortune 500 or other large companies, the view is, or entities, the view is that this will be really required and something that all should be working through moving forward for their consumers and constituents. AI presents big opportunities and potential risks for countries around the globe. The Ministry of Electronics and Information of India has reshaped the approach to AI regulation in India. Here you see the key provisions of what they're trying to do there. Government permission requirement lifted. There's an emphasis on transparency. There's an emphasis on modernization and preventing bias within the use of AI. There are mechanisms to consent, and there are also deep fake identifications. And that area is something, if you haven't really studied it, deep fakes are really concerning because in a lot of ways we're seeing it every day, but they're getting better and better in terms of the ability to make it seem like you're dealing with a particular individual or a particular situation when you're really not. So look to see that continue to be a hot button along with the other matters up there. So let's talk a little bit about what's going on in the US. As we've done to this point, we've talked about, issues at the international community level, issues at the US level, and then ultimately issues at the state level. So, in October of 2023, President Biden issued a executive order 14110 that was titled Safe, Secure, and Trustworthy Development and Use of Artificial Intelligence. The order intended to establish a comprehensive government-wide effort to guide responsible AI development and the use of artificial intelligence. Some of the key aspects of the law are on your screen, or the executive order, sorry, but protecting Americans' privacy is certainly something that is similar to what is being discussed now. Some of these other things may or may not be the same things that the next administration has an interest in dealing with, but certainly there are things that at the government level right now they're paying attention to, and they're trying to make those type of elements be at the forefront of the discussion of the use of ethical AI. The Federal Trade Commission similarly has gotten into the game here. Whether or not they stay involved or not in the next administration remains to be seen. The FTC views the use of AI through its own lens, just like any other governmental entity or state would. The because of that, the FTC wants companies to confront the hard questions surrounding AI's impact, value, and potential negative consequences as well. Most companies view AI through the lens of technology. The FTC cautions that companies must also acknowledge the risks of AI and remember that the data collected and processed at the end of the day is not their information, but it's information about their consumers. So, what safeguards do people think companies can implement to limit their liability? The FTC recommends that companies look at their recent policy statement on biometric information. While the statement deals with biometrics, guidance can be readily applied to AI systems. Again, things could change after January, after the election comes in, because obviously the president will have a say in that agency and what they come forward with moving forward. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration has a plan to regulate artificial intelligence in medical products. It's on the next slide. Among other things, they want to build an AI infrastructure and technical expertise. Again, this is on the side of dealing with prescription and other drugs. They want to foster international regulatory cooperation in the fight that they have moving forward. And they want dialogue with stakeholders to develop their regulatory framework. So in a lot of ways, that entity is an open book in terms of what it can do and what it will do and what it needs to do as it relates to the regulation of AI. There is a task force, a federal task force on artificial intelligence. The task force was announced by the U.S. House of Representatives, and it was announced in February of 2024. The intent is that the task force will produce a comprehensive report, including potential guidelines, including forward-looking recommendations, and including bipartisan policy proposals in consultation with the committees of jurisdiction in the U.S. House. Again, so far, there's no comprehensive thing done at the federal level, and so look to see that be a continuing discussion moving forward. My sense is we're going to stay at the state level, but there is a lot of discussion about doing something federally. Again, in the case of the legislation that was pending, one of the sponsors, Kathy McMorris Rogers in the House, is not running for re-election. And so what's the state of regulation of AI in the United States? Well, at the NAIC and level, the Innovation in Cybersecurity and Technology Committee, the first letter committee, the H committee, put in place in about 20 years since the G committee. It's the former Innovation and Technology Task Force. The goal of this committee is to explore technological developments within insurance sectors and to try to figure out how innovation, technology, and other aspects of what we've discussed today will ultimately affect consumer protections, insurer oversight, and the regulatory framework for products that exist today. There is an NAIC Big Data and Artificial Intelligence working group. That group is intended to make sure that, among other things, the principles that are developed should be interpreted and applied in the same manner, that accommodate the nature and scope and pace of change in the use of AI in the insurance industry, and that it promotes innovation while protecting the consumer. So no one's saying that AI is bad or AI is a problem, but what people are saying is we need to understand it better and we need to put some of these guardrails in place. The working group's regulatory principles on artificial intelligence intends to inform and establish general expectations for AI actors and systems, which emphasizes the importance of accountability, compliance, transparency, and safe, secure, and fair and robust outputs. Again, unintended bias, those are all things that there is a concern about. The view is that these principles should be interpreted and applied in a manner that accommodates the nature and pace of change. So it shouldn't be static, it should be a dynamic movement afoot, and I believe it will be. So the working group principles at the AI level is that AI be fair and ethical, is that there is accountability at the space of AI. On the next slide, you can see some of the factors there that AI actors have a responsibility to ensure that AI systems comply with principles. Those actors are accountable for the creation, implementation, and impact of AI systems, among other things. In addition, the big data and artificial intelligence working group principles included the notion that AI is compliant, that the people using it shall have the necessary knowledge and resources to comply, that the systems adhere to insurance laws and regulations within each jurisdiction, that, among other things, there is compliance with some of the laws I mentioned earlier, data privacy and data security laws as well. Moving on to some of the international aspects, or actually, if we can go on to the next slide. The model bulletin on the use of AI by insurers is out there. It was adopted at the fall 2023 national meeting. It's a guiding document intended to foster uniformity among insurance regulators regarding how insurance companies and insurance interests deploy AI. It was intended and does emphasize the importance of responsible governance in the use of AI, as well as risk management policies and procedures to ensure fair and just outcomes for consumers. And so that's the model bulletin that the NAIC put out, and we're finding ourselves in a position where that model bulletin on the next slide has been adopted by a number of different states that you see on the screen, and we anticipate that a number more will adopt that moving forward. But on the screen, you have the dates that those were adopted, and the model bulletin states as well as of just a few days ago. And so with that, that sort of tells you where we are in terms of AI, in terms of some of the interplay between AI, data security, and data privacy and cyber. There's a lot going on. The book is not closed on this issue. We could have spent 2 or 3 hours just talking about some of the things we just talked about in more granular fashion, but the goal was to give everyone a primer in this area. We're just at about an hour. I see some really nice comments on the screen. If we could put up the next slide, which has my contact information, there you have my email, karlinskif@gtlaw.com, or fred.karlinsky@gtlaw.com. That's KARLINSKY@gtlaw.com. You can also scan that QR code or call me. I hope everyone has a happy and healthy Thanksgiving and a happy and healthy holiday season and New Year. Mary Ellen, I will turn it back over to you. Before I do that, let me again say my sincere thanks for everything that Diana Capes has done for this industry, and my sincere appreciation for the role that Sherry Coleman is going to play moving forward.
We will miss Diana, but we are embracing Sherry. So it's a great situation. It's win-win. Diana gets some free time. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming today. And I want to thank you, Fred, for sharing your expertise with us again. And for also being a friend to SILA and the SILA Foundation. We know how busy you are, and we sincerely appreciate your time this afternoon and that of your staff who assisted you today. As a reminder to other attendees, our webinars are free of charge and they're open to the public. So we appreciate your sharing our invitations. Please watch for and complete that post-webinar survey and plan to join us in January for an update on fingerprinting and background checks. I'm wishing everybody a happy holiday, and we'll give you 3 minutes back to your day. Bye, everyone.